So now, before we dive into our first panel of the day, H1 learnings, H2 outcomes, the state of programmatic, I'd like to invite to our stage Emma Jowett, VP Northern Europe Sales at Integral Ad Science. This panel sets the tone for today's discussions with a fast-paced look at what moved the needle in the first half of the year, what had been barriers and blocks, and what is the outlook for the second half. A big round of applause to Emma. And a reminder again, use your Q&A box when you are online available. And with that, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jörg, and thrilled to be part of this event today. So I couldn't do this panel without some incredible panelists. So let me invite up Andrew Buckman, Chief Growth Officer at Azerion, Emma Newman, Chief Revenue Officer for Europe at PubMatic, Jason Wescott, Global Head of Commerce Solutions at WPP, and Mara Negri, CEO of EBX and VP of Marketing at Publieurope. Thank you guys for joining me today. Part one done. So I think everyone in this room online, we work in programmatic. We know how quickly this industry is moving. And I think what we're going to try and dig into in the next 20 minutes is a look back and a look forward to, some of the biggest trends and that we're seeing in the industry, and maybe some future predictions of what we might think for the second half of the year. So without further ado, let's kick off. The IAB Europe's AdX report concluded that digital advertising market grew by 16% in constant currency last year. Looking back, what expectations did you have for going into the first half of this year? And how are you tracking versus those expectations? I guess that's my first question. So, Andrew, let's start with you. Oh,
thank you very much. But on yes. Okay, fine. So it doesn't.
Marvelous. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I love this kind of question because I can say what I was expecting and then say what I got, and I look like a strategic genius at the end of it. So, yes, so last year was strong, and we were expecting a strong H1, but not as strong. So a little bit sort of depreciating in terms of growth. More of a focus on ROI. Advertisers we thought were going to be a lot more cautious because of all the geopolitical tensions, because of the upcoming tariffs and uncertainty about what Trump was going to do to the global economy. And what we actually got was pretty much that. It was and I can only really talk to Q1 because we're a public company. We've only released our Q1 numbers, but you can probably take it as an indication of H1. We've had a relatively strong first part of this year. Retail media has been very strong. So we've seen that advertisers have been really focused on performance and on return on investment. And video has been good, mostly driven by CTV and BVOD. And we're really seeing brands and agencies asking us more for return on investment, engaging formats and engaging campaigns that really show measurable success.
Great. Emma, does that echo kind of what you're seeing as well?
Quite a lot of it, yeah. I think that we went into the first half of the year quietly optimistic. I think it was, and I think we were justified to have that view. I think it was a year of, I've never done so much scenario planning in my life. So it was just like, is he going to say this? Is he going to say that? If he just says this, we do this. If he says that, we do that. So I had like 27 plans, I think, at one point. But similar to your point, I think that we thought agencies would, or brands would pull out of certainly branded advertising. And I think they did to some lesser or greater degree, but there's been a greater emphasis on performance-based advertising. And in fact, pretty much everything that we see now has a performance element, even in those channels where perhaps would be considered more branding. So CTV, for example, we're seeing a lot of performance asks from a CTV campaign. I also think that we've seen more of a shift out of the open exchange into more deal-based buying. Again, I think that's so that people are more confident about what they're buying, they have transparency on what they're buying. And we're seeing a shift, I think, to more compression of the supply chain. So people looking for working for sort of narrower supply chains, much more targeting on the supply side. But again, like you, we have public companies, so I'm not going to share stats, but you know, I ended the half relatively happy, and I'm feeling fairly confident about second half.
Do you want to go next?
Will do. Thanks.
Agency perspective.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah. So I'll speak more from an industry perspective. We put out twice a year, this year, next year forecasts. There's a lot of great information out there within this report. Similar to Andrew and Emma, I was just like, my God, like, here we go again. Did you guys not learn the first time around? Like, it's been a crazy 6 months. Like, it's an absolute roller coaster. I mean, we were forecasting the global advertising revenue to grow 7.7% at the end of last year for this year. We've downgraded that forecast in June to 6%. So that's come down quite.
That's all advertising, not just digital.
All advertising, not digital. However, we're still seeing a very strong growth trajectory in digital. So we see at the moment pure play digital as about 73% share of advertising revenue globally. Now, if you add in things like digital out of home, connected TV, we call those the extensions, that takes it up to 81%. And we're expecting it by 2030 to be 87% share. So it's moving very much still with that aggressive trajectory towards a higher share for digital. But really interesting layer on top of that is that we looked at the top 350 brands for advertising, and their digital share is actually 47%. So they're still doing a lot within the analog world. And then if we look at the digital share of all other advertisers, it's 80%. So I think that definitely tells a story there. I think from a programmatic perspective, it's really interesting. When I was at Interact in Brussels in May, Daniel Knapp was talking about the programmatic was a re-acceleration of growth, and that was 18.4% growth in programmatic for 24 versus 7.4% growth the previous year. So that's a huge uptick, you know, over double the growth rate. And I think it is that channel expansion now into more programmatic, the democratization of buying. That's what's really driving things. I think JC Decaux commented that they're seeing a big uptick in programmatic digital out of home. I think digital out of home accounts for 41% of out of home ads, and they're seeing a big uptick in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, for example, and then, you know, similar trend on CTV as well.
Well, I was going to ask you about given the consumer changes in terms of consumer behaviors, how is you seeing the impact on your business, given you're in the CTV space?
We are lucky enough because we are on the CTV BVOD business, and of course the growth is driven by this consumer shift. So we ended 2024 in a very good position, and we were expecting 2025 to be similar. And I have to say H1 is in line with our expectations. Consumer shift, but also the platform evolving, because all the broadcasters are also changing the offer, and it's becoming more and more available in programmatic. This was not the case a couple of years ago. We also see the first broadcaster giving access to linear to be both in programmatic. So this is, from our point of view, will boost even more the investments in the second part of the year.
Okay. And in terms of, you mentioned scenario planning, multiple scenario plans. Do you think the second half is going to require that kind of agility in the same way as H1? Do you want to?
I think the reality is that the environment within which we all work is going to require agility regardless, and it's almost become the new normal now. I think where we are seeing a level of I guess, stability is in the channels that people are choosing to buy. So video in pretty much all of its formats, CTV and BVOD particularly. We've done a lot of work recently with broadcasters in helping to educate them about how do you actually take that linear spend, because it's not a natural. I think there's been an assumption that the linear money will just follow the consumer to the BVOD platform. And in fact, that's not the case. The linear money is leaving the linear platform. Some of it is going to BVOD, but quite a lot is going to social. Quite a lot's going to search. A lot of it's going into retail media. So, you know, how do we help make sure that that sits within that ecosystem? So I think there will be some consistencies, and we will see certain trends continue to evolve. Retail will continue to grow. CTV and BVOD will continue to grow. Dual-based buying will continue to grow. I think there is some uncertainty around maybe some of the more traditional programmatic platforms, such as mobile web and that kind of thing. So I think that's where the uncertainty is going to lay.
And Andrew, you mentioned, you know, everything's about driving performance and delivering outcomes for advertisers, obviously, in this, when everything when every dollar counts. How are you seeing that manifest itself in the second half of the year and your outlook, you know, for 2026?
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said, Emma. Sort of, there's almost no campaigns now which don't have some performance element in them today. So every branding campaign, attention is no longer enough. You have to have awareness in there and brand lift and consideration, and ideally something that shows measurable success further down the line. So whether that's in terms of store visits or purchases or downloads, depending on what you've got. So everything that we can do that links up a brand's CRM with the campaigns that they run is what we're looking at focusing on. Without us being a retail media player per se, we're also seeing what can we do to support retail media. So we do that very much in the way of things like media and data and creative packages that help drive measurable sales, and formats that are both sort of highly engaging and potentially shoppable or at least interactive, and really push to being able to help advertisers get a proper measure on the return of their ad spend.
Yeah, I have to say, from an IAS perspective, you're right. Before it was about how do I avoid bad stuff. Now it's about how do I take media quality and make sure that that's a core principle within my media buying and my strategy, because it's the number of times I hear advertisers now saying we don't want to buy cheap reach. It's about buying better quality inventory, because ultimately that will drive the performance that we're being asked to deliver with our media budgets. Mara, from your perspective, do you think this shift to CTV is happening as quickly as we may have predicted in terms of the investment?
I think
what needs to happen?
what we are gonna focus on H2 is really, I think, is a matter of education as well. So the market is really complex, fragmented, and diversified. So from our point of view, to drive more investments and more clients to BVOD platform is really explain what is the difference on the video landscape today in the market. So you see very different prices, but it's also very different KPIs and outcomes. So this is for us a clear focus for H2, building documents that help this to be clear at client side, especially in programmatic, because historically the price is a very important KPI and we are expensive. So sometimes clients say, no, thank you, you're much more expensive yet, but you should consider why. And then in terms of shift is also because we work on the pan-European international investments. So what is key is also being easy to buy cross markets. So in terms of strategy, we are trying to accelerate being more international. So if a client wants to buy Europe, you should be able to buy in an easy way, like on YouTube, on Google, on Netflix, on other platforms. So that's the challenge, I think, where broadcasters historically are very strong locally. But if they want to compete with global OTTs, they need to be a bit more international.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that notion of automation, I think we talk about outcomes in terms of the KPIs and the ROI, but from an agency perspective, how important is where does that fit into your conversations with advertisers? Are they looking for more efficiencies from their partners?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not enough to kind of set and forget and just checking on things every kind of couple of weeks. We have the technology at our disposal now to be able to keep in tune with the performance and look at results in real time and use custom algorithms, to actually update and optimize the campaigns, which is really important. I think Mara makes a great point around making things easy to buy. And again, it's something I pointed to earlier within the democratization of access. I think about a month ago, Uber announced that they were making their journey ads available via a range of DSPs. I think they entered into a partnership with Google Ads Manager, and that could make what is traditionally just available through an Uber interface. I think powered by Criteo probably in that case, but yeah, you could be bought through the Trade Desk, DV360, or Yahoo. So that's really important. I think the dynamic of partnerships, bringing things into play that you wouldn't necessarily expect, either like the Roku and Amazon DSP deal, which I didn't kind of see on the cards, but that's really, really interesting, and definitely just throws a new dynamic into the mix when you've got a big sort of player so vertically integrated like Amazon across all of the different channels that they operate in, getting more into US living rooms through a partnership with a big broadcast player. That just shows a really, really interesting dynamic. So yeah, I think Andrew raised a really, really good point around performance and people expecting, advertisers expecting that performance, and everything having a performance edge now. And that's what's really, really important for us to deliver, because one, I think when the economic outlook is a little bit more uncertain, every dollar spent is going to be under more heavy scrutiny. And there's an allure with digital and programmatic, because of the measurability of it. And when you've got like the iron, we call it the iron grip of procurement in terms of setting things up on the client side, if we can offer those outcomes and that measurability, and to some degree some certainty with it, that's what advertisers are looking for.
Yeah, you're right. And so is the agentic future the answer to everything, Emma, Andrea? Like, what's your POV on that? We couldn't have a panel without.
I wondered when AI was going to come up. And I was wondering whether I was going to be the first person to worrying that I'm the first person about it. So I think there's two things. If I think about the future, and we're talking about the next 6 months, so I think there's two things. One is definitely AI, but AI in terms of full funnel measurement. So making sure that you can actually run a campaign and measure both the top and the middle and the bottom of the funnel. And then choosing partners that can provide that level of insight and transparency and reporting, as well as real-time optimization of campaigns, real-time planning, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's definitely going to be part of the second half of the year. I also think the other thing that there's going to be a consolidation trend. I mean, I think we talk about consolidation all the time, but if I think about the CTV space specifically, and maybe it's not consolidation, it's more partnerships, people that traditionally have been enemies, for want of a better phrase. So TFN and Netflix have just announced a partnership. Who would have put money on that? Probably not me, if I'm honest. But they're understanding TFN is great at premium content for France, and Netflix has got a fantastic video on demand platform. So come together and you both win. You've had the relationship with Sky, Channel 4 and on ITV, really thinking, how do they compete against, there's a lot more money out there that TV doesn't get. So how do they come together and use technology to bring new money into the marketplace? You've got Disney and Amazon, again, not natural bedfellows potentially, but you think about, well, you've got the data and you've got the content, and that makes perfect sense. So I think we'll continue to see, I'm not sure if it's consolidation, it's more partnerships.
Yeah, for the greater good, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's going to be a lot more consolidation, a lot more partnerships, and at every level. I mean, we see ourselves as a consolidator on a smaller level of deals than Disney and Amazon, for example. But still, we think there's still a lot of fragmentation, so there's a lot of space for consolidation. So we see. I'm anticipating more pressure in H2 this year from advertisers that need better return on investment, from more and more competition and focused competition in space, particularly in CTV, and retail media in itself becoming more and more mature. So it becoming much more of a natural path to market for most advertisers. And then the agentic AI side, we're investing quite heavily in that as well at the moment. I think as probably most people are. There's not a single presentation that we give that hasn't got at least one AI slide on it. But what we're seeing it more on the agentic AI side is the ability for us to make our tools more accessible. So if anyone in this room started their career as a trader or an ops executive, you'll know that the first month of your career is probably the most boring month of your career because you spend it in front of countless videos learning all the different DSPs and all the different SSPs and figuring out what drop-down menu to choose and what button to press. And the agentic AIs now help you use natural language just to say, I want a campaign for BMW in the southwest of France for 45 to 60-year-old professionals, and it'll go out and do it and do the whole media plan for you. So we think that's going to be good in terms of making these kind of tools more accessible. And a whole other debate, which Dom and I were talking about earlier on, is how do people coming into the industry actually start to learn these habits and techniques for advertising and stuff. But I think that's probably the makings of
For another
panel.
day. Yeah, that 20 minutes has just flown by. So quick fire answer. What is your top tip? If it's all about outcomes, ROI, what's the top tip or bit of advice, learning that you can leave the audience with? Each one of you gets a shot at this question.
Okay, that one was on the list. So top tips. So outcomes are definitely not table stakes anymore. So make sure that there is a performance element in everything that you do and that you can measure how that performance impacts the campaign.
Thank you.
I would say write your brief properly so that the people, just saying, write your brief properly so that the people who are responsible for delivering your outcome actually know what they're trying to deliver.
I think that's a very fair point.
I've felt the pain on that one. For me, it's just commit with no compromise. I think quite often outcomes are a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more challenging to bring about, but they're so worth it if you actually leverage, data points that are out there, use more technology to bring about more of an automated result and really dial up that outcome, but commit to it and don't cut corners around it.
Fair point.
And on my side, maybe is really be sure you are comparing apple to apple. So today we still have problem measurement. So I think until the moment where we won't be able to measure cross-device impact or total audience, total campaign results, I think it's important to read your plan and making sure you are comparing in the right way your results.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And from my perspective, a little bit echoing what you said, you've got data that can tell and support decision making and planning. So let's make sure that you're using it. It shouldn't be tick box data anymore. It's actionable. It needs to be actionable. Thank you so much, amazing panelists. Handing back to Jörg, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Emma, and a big thank you also to all the panelists sharing lots of really interesting and insightful and also actionable insights.